Hey guys, welcome back. This is the story about what if Naruto went to Demon Slayer universe. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well, it really means a lot. So let's start the what if. The fireplace burned relentlessly, warming the space around them. Its heat was a strange thing, an unfamiliar thing, a stark reminder of his inability to revel in the sunlight. He watched the flames with weary eyes, distant thoughts swirling within his mind. Thoughts of the past. Thoughts of the present. Thoughts of all he had done to reach this point. Close. He was very close to the solution. He could almost feel it. Yet, everything still seemed so far away. So out of reach. The more time passed, the more impatient he became. This curse, he feared, would never leave him. And he would be trapped in a body that despised the sun. Forever languishing in darkness, never to feel the piercing rays of that star in the sky. A sudden burst of fury welled up within him, a white-hot anger that burned in his crimson eyes. His veins bulged, stretching across his porcelain visage. His fangs and claws lengthened, fingers tearing into the furniture upon which he sat. He gritted his teeth, a roar of rage at the cusp of his lips. Father? The little girl stirred in his arms, awakening from her slumber. She looked up tiredly, gaze rising to meet his own. Seething, it took every ounce of self-control to keep himself from tearing this child apart. But despite his bloodlust, she stared at him without fear, her head tilted. This child, his daughter, looked into his crimson eyes, both curious and unflinching. And for some reason, he did not devour her in that moment. Instead, he observed her closely, like a predator watching its prey, as she lifted her tiny arms and touched his face. "Are you okay?" she asked, innocent as a dove. He calmed himself with a breath, the feeling of her hands strangely warm against his icy flesh. "Yes, sweetheart," the man said softly, lying through his teeth. "I'm fine. You have nothing to worry about." "Oh, okay." She looked rather unconvinced. "You know, Mother tells me it's alright to be sad sometimes," she mumbled tiredly, a yawn escaping her lips. She snuggled into his chest and closed her eyes, unaware of the monster that held her in his arms. Though his daughter had fallen asleep once more, the heat of her hands still lingered on his cheeks. Muzan frowned, for it reminded him of the sun's warmth. Ozaki awoke with a strangled gasp. "Don't leave me." Eyes wide, panic washed over her. She looked around with confusion, sweat slicking her skin, fingers curling into fists, hands clutching at the soft blanket on her lap. The light was blinding, unrelenting. She could hardly see, could hardly feel, as she finally returned from the land slumber, painful dreams still plaguing her mind. Where was she? In a room. Not the inn, though. Strange, Ozaki thought. She glanced around and found that she was on a bed, and that her jaw throbbed painfully as she turned. Hand against her head, she tried to remember where she was and what had happened to her. Then she saw him, standing to her left. Ozaki stiffened, reaching for a sword that wasn't there. Grimacing, she tossed the covers aside, finding the nearest escape route, a door left slightly ajar. Then she sucked in a sharp breath, muscles tensing in preparation for an impromptu getaway. However, before she could even move, she heard a familiar voice. "Ozaki, stop," he urged. It's okay. Murata?" Turning around fearfully, Ozaki was somewhat relieved to see her fellow demon slayer. He was seated upright in a bed similar to hers, smiling nervously, like he always did. And next to him was that blond man, a stethoscope wrapped around his neck. He observed her curiously, blue eyes glinting with interest. Her heart began to race as memories of their encounter flashed before her. She recalled the ease at which he had defeated her, the strength within those arms, and the sheer speed he possessed. Worry slipped into her stomach. They were in his domain. If he so wished, he could kill them in an instant. "As you can see," the man finally said, "I'm no demon." He walked over to the window, fully opening the curtains. Then, he bathed in the sunlight, allowing it to fall upon his skin. And true to his word, he did not burst into flames, nor did any sounds of discomfort escape his lips. Now, please relax so I look at your injuries. Injuries? At that, she felt the throb of pain in her jaw and the aching of her stomach. Ozaki glanced over at Murata. He seemed relaxed, calm, even. Her fellow demon slayer gave a single nod, mouthing, "It's all right," and she felt her shoulders slump and her muscles slowly relax. Unbidden, shame flooded her veins. She bowed her head despite the pain, and said, "I apologize, sir." The man perked up, suddenly intrigued. Ozaki shut her eyes tightly. As demon slayers, we are supposed to help civilians, protect them from demons, not attack them. I've gone against this code, trampled it beneath my feet. For that, I'm truly sorry for what I did. There was silence. A lingering silence that set her heart racing once again. Ozaki dared not lift her head to meet his gaze, even as the tense moment finally passed. "I forgive you." Her eyes went wide. "Ha!" He grinned, a beautiful flash of teeth. "I said I forgive you. And besides, your partner over here already apologized 1,000 times already. So, I'm convinced that your sentiments are at least genuine." The man moved over to Murata, kneeling at the side of the bed. "To be honest, I can't really blame you for what you did last night. You're demon slayers, after all. You're trained to hunt and kill things that could pose a threat to human lives. Of course, I would have preferred if we talked things out first, but that's all over and done with. I'm Naruto, by the way." Her gaze lingered on this strange man. "Ozaki." "Nice to meet you, Ozaki," Naruto replied. He then continued to assess Murata and asked him to lift up his shirt. The young man complied, revealing a purple bruise that stretched across his chest. Naruto grimaced, feeling a tad guilty. He gently palpated the slayer's sternum, checking for any abnormalities. "Do you feel any pain or tenderness?" "Why, yeah. A little." Murata nodded, wincing beneath his touch. He chuckled weakly, "You hit hard, doctor." "Sorry." Naruto said softly. Focusing, he sent a pulse of chakra into his sternal area. A gentle glow seemed to surround his palm, an ethereal energy flowing into the afflicted area. "Does that feel better?" The demon slayer's shoulders lost all tension. "Actually, yeah." Murata could feel the pain receding, fading into a barely noticeable ache. He shuddered as one final wave of energy entered his body. It felt peculiar, but at the same time, satisfying. Naruto smiled with relief, moving on to Ozaki. He reached out and took her chin between his fingers. He tilted her face upward and inspected her jaw for signs of dislocation. Ozaki's cheeks warmed at the proximity, and she averted her gaze. "Can you lift up your shirt for me?" he asked. Her face flushed exceedingly bright, but a stab of pain in her stomach made her forget any feelings of embarrassment. Unbuttoning her uniform, Ozaki tugged the hem of undershirt, exposing her toned stomach, now discolored by a violet bruise. Naruto gently reached out, fingers brushing her abdominal region. Ozaki shivered, despite the warmth of his hand. "Any pain?" Ozaki grimaced and nodded. Then, he began the healing. The warmth of his hand spread through her skin and into the muscles of her stomach. Eyes widening, she was surprised by the strange, yet pleasant feeling that sent tingles down her spine. Before she knew it, the pain began to ebb away, replaced by a warmth that slowly grew colder. Once finished, Naruto pulled away. Ozaki was left frozen, glancing at Murata, then at the blonde man that had just seemingly healed her injuries. He tapped her jaw in a swift motion, and the pain there dulled as well. How did you do that?" Naruto smiled mischievously. "It's a secret." He moved away from her bed, grabbed a stool, and sat down between both demon slayers. Arms crossed, his gaze moved from her to Murata, before finally settling on the window that displayed his garden, which seemed to glisten in the morning sun. "Okay," he began. "I'm sure you have some questions. The looks on your faces pretty much tells me that you're both confused, possibly amazed, and a little afraid." Naruto leaned back against the wall behind him. "So, how about this? I'll answer your one burning question, only if you answer my question in return, alright?" Their one burning question. Murata glanced at her, and they both knew what that question was. "Okay then. Why, is there a demon here?" he asked hesitantly, unsure of what Naruto's reaction would be. The blonde rubbed his hair sheepishly. "Susumaru? Well, long story short, she's my guest. She's been staying with me for a few days now, actually." Both slayers looked at him as though he had lost his mind. "But that's a demon," Ozaki whispered through gritted teeth. "They kill people. They eat people. All without remorse for their actions. How could you possibly harbor a demon?" The anger in her voice could not be contained. Murata glanced her way, shaking his head in an attempt to calm her down. After all, they were still in a position of weakness. Without their weapons, they were powerless against someone like this doctor. Sorry," Murata mediated. "I think what she's trying to say is that this kind of situation is unheard of. We devoted our lives to killing demons without discrimination. So when we hear something like this, it's very difficult to process." Naruto watched them closely, studying the upset Ozaki and the cautious Murata. He figured this would happen. This situation was a bit strange, even to him. He had killed many demons since coming here, and not once had one given up during their fight. Not one had stopped to consider their mortality when attacking him. Driven by a lust for his flesh, they kept trying to eat him, even when they were soundly beaten, even when he left them in the sun to die. But Susumaru had been different. She attacked him, yes. However, when faced with the reality of her death, while still craving his blood, she stopped to consider his words. As a result, he had decided to give her a chance. A gamble, of course. But still, she had proven herself a person of her word. Someone willing to change, in spite of the urges that plagued the mind of a typical demon. "I don't expect you to understand my actions, nor do I expect you to agree with them," Naruto said calmly. "However, one fact remains here. When you attacked her, Susumaru did not use lethal force against you. She didn't even use her weapons, which, if she did, would have left both of you in a much worse state. In short, all she did was defend herself from you, right?" The silence was palpable. Looking at it objectively, that was the truth. They attacked her first, and all she did was evade. In the end, they would have killed her if Naruto hadn't intervened, but if she had resorted to those weapons of hers, then they would certainly have more injuries than they did now. That's not the point," Ozaki urged, her argument losing steam. "Even if she's somehow different, most demons aren't. Knowing this, it's impossible to tell which ones aren't bloodthirsty monsters." "I agree," Naruto said. "That's why I'm not angry at you for attacking her. It's my fault, really. I should have been out there with her. Maybe if I'd been there earlier, we could have at least talked things out." He rubbed his spiky mane, sighing. "This whole situation was just unfortunate. But I hope we've come to a bit of an understanding." Murata nodded slowly. "I guess." Ozaki remained silent, unsure of what to say. "Anyway," Naruto continued. "What brought you to my clinic last night?" "A demon," Ozaki answered quietly. "We were given a mission to kill the demon that terrorized Nerima a few days ago. We wanted to see if you knew anything, since you're treating some of the victims." Naruto leaned forward. "Well, I was out of town during the incident. So, unfortunately, I don't have much details as far as descriptions go." "Damn," Murata muttered. "We still have 0 leads then." "If it helps," Naruto continued, "one of my patients did report seeing a single demon. They also said that there were animals involved, like wolves and even a bear. Animals? Ozaki echoed. She instantly remembered seeing the claw marks that were carved into buildings. And she didn't like the implications of it. That's about all I have for you though, the blonde said, standing up. Thank you, said Murata, bowing his head. Even though it doesn't seem like much, this information should be very useful to us. No problem, Murata. Naruto gave a half smile, crossing his arms once more. And actually, I'm considering going after this demon myself. Both Slayers' eyes widened with alarm, a million questions forming in their minds. However, before they could utter a word of protest, someone knocked on the door. A moment later, they entered. Murata and Ozaki's eyes nearly bulged from their sockets. They were speechless, gazing with a mixture of confusion and fascination. Because the person that had just arrived looked exactly like Michiro Takedo, the Mist Hashira. His hair was shorter, and his demeanor was different, faintly aloof, more serious. He was also missing an arm. But the resemblance was there, almost uncanny. Yuichiro paused, taking one sweeping glance around the room. He frowned, then sighed with exasperation, a small, yet knowing smile on his lips. Okay, sensei, he remarked. What on earth happened here last night? Naruto only chuckled. Let's discuss this outside, he said sheepishly. The doctor had been gone for a few minutes, presumably to explain the situation to who they assumed was his student. Now, left to their own devices, both of them sat in silence. Only the sounds of singing birds and a whistle of wind filled the quiet room. Murata exhaled in an exaggerated manner, glancing her way. So, what are you thinking, Ozaki? She gripped her covers tightly. That he's incredible. I know. Murata clenched and unclenched his fists. He beat us so easily, and he doesn't even know any breath styles. Not even the most basic of techniques. In fact, he barely seemed to take a breath while we fought. That strength of his. I wonder where it comes from. He's also a medical expert. Just like Lady Shinobu, she added. And he seems to be around our age, too. Murata recalled their conversation with Naruto, a contemplative look entered his eyes. You think we should try recruiting him to the corps? It was a risky idea, but a good one, nonetheless. Maybe, Ozaki said. We could really use someone with such raw talent. Imagine if he was properly trained. He could probably become as strong as a Hashira. It's possible, Murata replied, crossing his arms. He was still surprised by the fact that his chest no longer hurt. But we'll have to convince him first. And honestly, I don't think we made a good first impression. That's for sure. Ozaki frowned, a wave of guilt washing over her. But still, he's harboring a demon. I don't think anyone, especially the Hashira, will tolerate having someone like that join us. What a shame. Murata leaned back against his palms. We need all the help we can get against the demons. We need stronger people. Yeah, Ozaki said sadly, eyes distant. There were truly special people in this world, freaks of nature that made normal humans look like fodder. The Hashira were a prime example, and so was Naruto. In a way, it discouraged her because she knew she would never reach their level. She wasn't talented, nor was she particularly strong. And if she could be beaten so easily by an untrained person, was she really powerful enough to make a difference in the world? The thought gnawed at her stomach, twisting and mangling Ozaki's confidence in her abilities. Also, did you see that guy just now? Murata continued. Is it just me, or did he look a lot like Master Takedo? Pushing those feelings aside, Ozaki managed a nod. I thought I was the only one that noticed. The hair's shorter, though. And I don't remember hearing that Master Takedo has brother. Did you? Nope. Murata shrugged. He's probably just someone that looks like him. That's not too uncommon. A moment of silence slipped by, and she could hear Naruto talking with his student, her sharp ears gleaning bits of information. It wasn't a heated discussion by any means, as far as she could tell. Naruto says he might be going after the demon that caused all this, Murata whispered. Ozaki frowned. I don't think that's a good idea, she said. Civilians shouldn't risk their safety like that. He might be strong, but he doesn't have a Nichiren blade. He can't kill a demon. That's true, he replied, studying the walls. We'll tell him to leave it to us, that it's our job to handle these sorts of things. We should also get back to work as soon as possible, Ozaki said. This mission is already becoming too long. I'm sure our crows will be coming to check in on us soon. Murata stretched his muscled arms above his head. How long should we stay here then? Until evening, maybe, she suggested. I feel better. Whatever it is he did, I'm not in pain anymore. Me neither, Murata said, stroking his chin in thought. It's kind of strange, don't you think? Yeah, she said, that suspicion resurfacing in her mind, but she shook it away. He's not a demon though. We know that for sure now. Murata nodded and rose from his bed, intent on finding a restroom. He yawned and headed for the door. Then I guess it's settled. We'll stay a little longer. Night. When they decided to leave, the sun had just set. And for some reason, Naruto's garden looked even more beautiful in the darkness. To Murata, it was very calming, reminiscent of his hometown, where the full moon would shine its radiance upon streams and rivers and lakes. They ended up staying longer than expected. Despite their rocky encounter, Naruto had shown them a great deal of kindness. Contrary to their initial expectations, he did not harbor a grudge against them, nor did he treat them worse than his other patients. He gave them free reign over his home, with certain exceptions, of course. He fed them, talked with them when he wasn't busy, and even gave them the best routes to follow when in the city. In essence, it was a peaceful day. A well-needed reset from all the stress of trying to find their target. Now, they were at the door, ready to set out for the night. Murata threw on his Haori and fastened his katana to his side, and Ozaki did the same, clutching a pack of essentials Naruto had graciously provided them. It contained food and various medical supplies just in case they needed it. In light of his kind actions, both slayers had urged Naruto to not attempt fighting the demon they were after. It was their job, they explained. And that, in spite of his strength, he wasn't equipped with the right tools to face such a threat. He agreed, albeit reluctantly. Are you sure you're okay to leave? Naruto asked. Murata nodded, a small smile on his lips. Yes, we're fine, Doctor. We still have a mission to complete, after all. Okay, Naruto said simply. Sorry for attacking you, Ozaki repeated. I told you that you're forgiven, didn't I? He said, chuckling. Then he looked at them with a gentle gaze. Be careful. And if you need anything, my door is always open. Thank you, Murata replied, finally ready to leave. Both of them turned and went on their way, passing through his garden one more time. Ahead of them, near the pond, was that same demon from yesterday. She was sitting on the soft grass, laughing as she played with a black cat. They moved past her warily, hands gripping the hilts of their weapons, ready for her to strike. But she paid them no mind. She knew they were behind her, yet she made no move against them, nor did that smile ever leave her beautiful face. Later, Susumaru skipped along happily, clutching a book to her chest. Naruto was next to her, hands in his pockets as they strolled through the lively city street. There were many people still moving along the road, despite the absent sun. They went about their business, some laughing and chatting, some drinking, some hollering for customers at their food stands. He smiled a bit, reminded of Konoha's boisterous night life. If only he hadn't failed, he would be at home right now, celebrating the end of the worst war in the history of the shinobi world. It was approaching that time of year, the anniversary of his defeat at the hands of his closest friend. The infinite Tsukuyomi had been bad enough, but Sasuke's plan to murder the Kage and bring the world under his control through fear, tyranny, and violence was, in his opinion, just as evil. What was happening now? He wondered. Was Tsunade dead? Gaara? The others? Who else had perished because he couldn't stop the last Uchiha? He frowned at the thought, hands clenching into fists. He had an obligation to go back, to stop whatever hell the people of the elemental nations were being put through. No matter what, he had to find a way. Naruto? Her soft voice cut through the fog in his mind. He turned and could see her looking at him curiously. Her amber eyes landed on his trembling fists, then found their way back to his face. Is everything? He put on his brightest smile. I'm okay, Susumaru. You sure? She pressed, inching closer and inspecting his features. I'm not convinced. Naruto laughed softly, nudging her with an elbow. Trust me. I'm fine. After a moment, she finally relented, pulling back. If you say so, Doctor, Susumaru said playfully as she clutched that orange book. Oh. I see you've been reading my book, he said, taking notice of what she was holding. She beamed. The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi. It has a very interesting title, but I have to say, it's got me hooked. And even more interesting is the fact that the main character has your name. Coincidence? I don't think so. You're right about that, Naruto explained as they moved past a throng of laughing people. That book was written by my sensei. My parents loved it so much they decided to name me after the main character. Really? She asked. That's actually very sweet. Whoever this Jiraiya guy is, he sure knows how to write. I'd like to meet him someday. Naruto smiled gently, clasping his hands behind his spiky mane. He died a few years ago. Susumaru's face fell. Sorry. I didn't mean to assume. He waved her off. Don't worry. You didn't know. In fact, I'm glad you like his writing so much that you'd want to meet him. He'd be happy to know that. Naruto paused, thinking. However, I'm not sure if you'd really want to meet him in person. She arched a brow. Why's that? Let's just say, he was a very perverted man, Naruto said, laughing wistfully. And, as much as he liked to deny it, Jiraiya's ways had certainly rubbed off on him, to some degree. Susumaru shrugged. Well, everyone has a perverted side, she said. Some are just good at hiding it. Are you speaking from experience? Naruto teased. Eyes widening, a blush tinted her pale cheeks. Maybe. Even demons have urges, you know. She shook her head, quickly changing the subject. Anyway, you never told me where we're going. Well, I wanted it to be a surprise, Naruto said, but we're going to see my friend. This friend of his. The same one he had mentioned when she first started staying with him and Yuichiro. She wondered what was so special about this woman. Evidently, she lived in a different part of Tokyo, and she owned a clinic as well, tending to people that weren't in Naruto's immediate vicinity. Someone waved in their direction, and Naruto returned the gesture. Susumaru hadn't noticed it before, but a lot of people seemed to know her companion. Probably former patients of his, she realized. Also, I've been meaning to ask how you're doing, Naruto suddenly said. I mean, after all that happened yesterday, with Ozaki and Murata. Are you all right? Physically, yes, she was great. But emotionally, well. She gritted her teeth. Ugh. They pissed me off so much, she exclaimed. I tried to talk to them, but they wouldn't listen. I even made sure not to attack them with my temari, and all they did was cut off my arms. It was just terrible. Absolutely terrible. After getting all of the frustration off her chest, Susumaru took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. But, as I've said many times before, I won't blame them for deciding to attack me. Her final words were soft, understanding. And Naruto looked upon her with a warm gaze. "You kept your promise to me," he said, "and I appreciate it. But if this ever happens again, I want you to know that it's okay to defend yourself. You've proven that I can trust you." He turned away, rubbing his golden hair. "Anne, I can't have you dying on me now, can I?" "Of course not," she replied, grinning. "I'm not dying anytime soon. Not yet. Oh, and since she lives a bit far away, just walking will take too long," Naruto said, entering a secluded alley, so, he smirked. "Try to keep up." In that moment he leapt upward, jumping atop buildings in a burst of speed. Susumaru felt excitement surging through her, always eager for a challenge. She followed after him, bounding forward in an attempt to keep pace, all while laughing with glee. In the end, though, she could hardly keep up. They covered a quarter of the city in a matter of minutes, but he'd always been a few meters ahead of her, no matter how much energy she put into her legs. Finally, their surroundings began to change, giving way to a more opulent area. An area even brighter than where Naruto's clinic was located. A place with more activity and wealthier denizens. They leapt off a particularly large building, then continued on foot. They were a blur in the night, barely noticeable to those around them. Naruto slowed down a bit, and she found herself running beside him. They wound through a few more streets until they reach a lengthy compound. Ahead, a dead end quickly approached. Even as the wall loomed closer, Naruto did not stop. Just before she voiced her concern, he ran right through it, as though the wall was nothing but a projection. She followed suit, slipping past the wall that was created by what she assumed was a concealment talisman, made possible by a blood demon art. Slowing down, they stopped in front of a beautiful house, where a woman and a young man were waiting at the door. The woman smiled at both of them, and in that moment, Susumaru knew that these two weren't human. Tamayo was beautiful, as always. With comely features and a feminine physique, she was the object of many men's desires. Dressed in a floral-patterned kimono, her gaze was kind as she welcomed him in. He hadn't seen her in a month, and he found that he missed her company. Technically speaking, they weren't too far away from each other, but with both of them owning a clinic, things tended to become busy, leaving them little time to meet. However, every month he cleared his schedule and came to visit. Firstly, so he could see her. And secondly, so he could supply both her and Yashiro with his blood. "Come on, dear," Tamayo encouraged, gently beckoning to Susumaru. She was still standing at the entrance, frozen with trepidation. She hesitated, glancing at Naruto as he looked on with an encouraging smile. "You're a demon?" she asked. Tamayo nodded slowly. "I am. Both me and Yashiro are. I assumed Naruto would have told you." Crossing her arms, she accosted Naruto with an accusing stare. "Well, he didn't tell me at all." At that, the blonde chuckled. "I guess this is the surprise." "Naruto!" Tamayo scolded. "You didn't tell her?" She shook her head as her blonde friend put his hands up innocently. "Well, I can't say I'm shocked. Since I've known you, you've always been a playful person. In any case, Susumaru, I'm Tamayo, and this is my clinic." "And I'm Yashiro, Lady Tamayo's faithful aide," said the person standing at the woman's side. He looked young, barely an adult in appearance, but Susumaru knew he was far older than any human. In that moment, she froze, pausing for a moment as she realized that this woman was called Tamayo. The Tamayo. A fugitive. On the run from Muzan for hundreds of years. Finally getting over the shock, she entered the building. "You know my name?" "Of course," Tamayo affirmed. "Naruto sent me a letter detailing what happened on his way back to Tokyo. I must admit, I was a bit surprised. But looking at us, it's not so hard to believe that a demon would try to change their ways. Right this way, please." They followed the doctor to a room, one with cushions and places to sit. Susumaru stuck close to Naruto. Even though she was surrounded by her own kind, she still felt a bit nervous. She didn't know why, but this whole situation was surreal. The fact that there were other demons that could control themselves in the presence of a human like Naruto. "I want you to wait here for a bit," Naruto told her. "Miss Tamayo and I have some business to attend to." Wait," she whispered, glancing around. Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder. "You'll be fine. It won't be long. And plus, you'll have Yashiro to keep you company." The male demon huffed, crossing his arms pompously. "If you think I'll leave Lady Tamayo's side, then you're gravely mista. Yashiro." Tamayo's voice sent a chill down his spine. I mean, if it's what Lady Tamayo desires, then I'll gladly stay with her." "Good." Tamayo smiled sweetly. "Feel free to relax, dear. Come along, Naruto." Susumaru watched him leave, a strange feeling arising in her chest. She crossed her arms and sighed, taking a seat. "And what are you looking at?" she asked. Yashiro's brow twitched with annoyance. "It's hard to believe that it's almost been 3 years since we met," Tamayo remarked. She led him into sterile room. Naruto followed and entered, finding a single bed to sit on. He knew the drill. They'd done this more times than he cared to count, so he remained still, took off his jacket, and rolled up his sleeve, exposing his arm for her to extract his blood. "Feels like yesterday that you found me, bloodied and dying," Naruto recalled. "I was so exhausted. I wouldn't have survived long without you." "You flatter me, Naruto," she said. "Your body heals quicker than a typical human's. I didn't play that big of a role in your recovery." He smiled a bit. "I wouldn't say that." Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.